What episode of a television show was so bad that it nearly ruined the entire series for you? I stopped watching Bones after one of the sweet side characters was revealed to be the apprentice of a serial killer. Completely out of left field and totally stupid. Yeah, that was a weird shock value move. Didn't really work either. They do a better job further down the series with an actual gut punch with one of the main characters, which sucked, but it has good real life reasons. CSI did 3 horrible write-offs of characters in 3 different series. That pissed me off. When it happened in CSI New York, I basically quit watching the show. Not this shit again. Once Upon a Time went really bad for the later seasons, no doubt, but I could still stomach it. The musical episode though, at a certain point in that show I was just watching the Emma/Hook bits and skipping through the rest. Too bad that really fun relationship dynamic was buried under so many layers of candy colored crap. The King of the Hill episode where Hank doesn't realize what sticker price is when buying a new truck and then attempts to vandalize the dealership. It was super out of character for Hank to not know how to purchase a vehicle and retaliate so childishly. It's a later season episode that I simply skip now. I kinda got the whole sticker price thing. Hank is a trusting guy and wouldn't gouge anybody for propane or propane accessories, so he doesn't think it would happen to him for a truck. The whole dismissing Peggy who did her research is totally in character, because Peggy is usually way off the mark. The King of the Hill scene that jumped the shark for me was where they get a new TV and return it because it's too loud and they can't figure out how to use it. Hank is a type of guy that would sit down with the manual to whatever he just bought until he knows it front to back. Semicolon. That being said, Cot is up near the top of my list for perfect shows. I can't pinpoint the specific episode, but basically, pick any episode from season 4 of Weeds. Up until that season, it was a great comedy/drama about this suburban widowed mom who was selling drugs to make money for her family. It poked fun at suburban life, and while it had wacky moments, it never felt too over the top. Then by season 4, they're like running away to Mexico and she's living with a drug lord and there are babies involved and it just completely got cranked up to 11 in the worst ways possible. Luckily the season 3 finale also feels like a really good series finale. So watch the show up until that point and then walk away and don't look back. Weeds should have been ended when Nancy set her house on fire. 2 last episodes of How I Met Your Mother deleted tons of character development and made the entire last season's story obsolete. Several years later and once a week my girlfriend still gets to listen to me rant about Barney and Robin breaking up making no sense. That 70s show had 2. The first is when Eric and Donna broke up. I knew the entire next season was going to suck and focus on them both dating around before they got back together. The second was when Eric decides to propose to Donna. I knew that meant they weren't going to college and were just going to be bumps, and I was right. The last 3 seasons of that show were unwatchable. The first few seasons were perfect. Even the early first episodes really set the scene for the show. Being a teenager in the 70s living in suburban America with your stoner friends and the girl next door was so good until it became so bad. It's just a show that was on too long for its premise. It's reasonably funny, it's nostalgic, but there's only so many times Donna and Eric can have relationship issues and the rest of the cast dates each other before it gets old. How I Met Your Mother. She died the way she lived. Off screen. The biggest travesty. I started to get unreasonably angry once they showed her sick because I freaking knew that it was all to reunite Ted and Robin and I was just so livid. The thing is, nobody wanted them together at that point. If that was their endgame from the beginning, they shouldn't have made Barney and Robin a thing in the first place. I'm currently rewatching him, and by season 1 you can already see how perfect a couple is Robin and Barney. I really hate their final episode. Last episode of Merlin. Open space for a new plot, but it wasn't created, right? They built the entire series up looking forward to a future moment when Arthur would finally be realized as this great king only for it to last like 5 minutes. That was my biggest issue. It wasn't even that Arthur died. It was that they spent 5 whole seasons building up to this great destiny of uniting Albion and restoring magic. And he never ducking did it. Also the magic reveal should have happened in like season 2 or 3, so we could bask in the glory of Arthur pretending not to know. And then Merlin emotionally confessing something Arthur's known for ages. And then the ensuing hijinks of both of them trying to hide it from other. The third part of Sabrina. I gave up on Ep 3 of S3. It was just so awful for a series I was loving. The show lost all of its horror part and became just about Sabrina being in love and a prick who only cares about Nick. I super enjoyed the first 2 parts. They had old school campy charm. Parts 3 and 4 were rough. I can't explain why, but KOS feels like a spiritual sibling of how True Blood declined. This, you nailed it. It definitely feels like it's deteriorating exactly like True Blood. They both got rid of any scare factor they had and went with super teeny bopper drama instead. That being said, I'm still going to watch this last season of Sabrina because I'm damn near masochist and need to finish anything I start, but it'll probably play on my phone the entire time. Stranger Things when Eleven runs away and chills with some street rats for some reason in an episode. Hated it. Haha, I totally forgot about that. What a weird waste of an episode. What a weird waste of an episode. They tried to both expand the universe, there are other characters with powers, and the setting, outside of Hawkins, and failed at both. It was an attempt to grow the show. Maybe look at spin-off options. But it was garbage. When Family Guy killed off Brian, they went to all the trouble of animating the intro with Vinny, only to use it on 1 or 2 episodes. They should have kept Brian dead for the rest of the season. We all knew he was coming back. But if you're going to try something new, actually try something new for a little bit. The entirety of the Gilmore Girls, A Year in the Life, put me off the original series, which used to be my favorite comfort watch. I really wish Amy Schumann Palladino did not mess with something that originally ended on a good, satisfying note. Honestly, Rory's whole I forgot I have this boyfriend, and whoops I also keep cheating on him with Logan thing was so irritating, and made it hard to focus on anything else. Plus that ending was frustrating as hell too. I guess it brings it full circle, but it just didn't do it for me at all. That once episode in Voyager where that one guy and the captain become giant lizard things after a failed tinkering with Warp 10. Like what? We've found a way to travel Warp 10. Yeah, but it evolves us. But the doctor has a magic tube that cures that. Apostrophe. Why they didn't just Warp 10 back to Earth then magic tube themselves remains a mystery. Throughout season 8 of GOT I was preaching patience. Let's see how it plays out. I didn't mind the White Walkers not being the ultimate bad guy. I thought Dana's turn was odd, but could potentially pay off. I was holding on to a thread of hope that there was a vision. So you can imagine my frustration with the finale. Lifeless, soulless, an utter disdain for the show and its fanbase. Fuck that. But who has a better story than Bran? The guy who never actually explained that he has powers to anybody. The same guy who often told people that he was no longer Brandon Stark when addressed as such, but rather the three-eyed raven. Then they're all like, arcing, Bran the Broken. And has just like, lol I guess I can be Bran again. I really liked the 100, but the whole Pike / Bellamy / Lincoln thing felt stupid forced. I haven't watched it after midway through S3. According to a few interviews, Bellamy's actor hated that storyline as well. The show does get better though, and in the final season, gets horribly, unbelievably worse. The last season was terrible. The Mayo it had some good potential, and they totally botched it. So no one is going to say Sherlock season 4. Do I have to be the one to bring that monstrosity up? Sherlock seasons 1, 2, 3 I had seen multiple times. I would just put it on in the background when I was doing other stuff because it was nice to follow along. When season 4 came out I was excited and watched it all in one day. I have not watched the show at all since then. Totally ruined it for me. Murder She Wrote. They had an episode set in Australia with American actors doing Australian accents, even though there were Australian actors living in LA at the time. The accents were that bad that I was too embarrassed to tell anyone that I ever watched the show. Drive time comedy on the radio. Had an absolute field day with it. Lucky me. I just watched the German dub version with my grandma. It was called Mordist IHR Hobby, which is a quite irritating title. It was called Mordist IHR Hobby, which is a quite irritating title. I mean, murder rates skyrocket everywhere Jessica Fletcher goes. Maybe it really is her hobby. Season 6 of The Blacklist. They stretched that shit way too long. I lost sight of the Og plot. I stopped watching when I realized I only watched it for the Spader monologue and didn't give a shit about the rest. If they do an episode based Elizabeth I, know it's going to be straight garbage. Spader is the only thing that makes that show even remotely watchable. TWD Season 8 mid-season finale. Strong episode absolutely ruined by the last 3 minutes. Greater than sign exclamation mark. Killing Carl is like if they killed Breaking Bad's Walter White in IDK. Season 2. It contradicts the whole story. It's just one of those things you explicitly don't do. Exclamation mark. Let's be completely honest. 90% of TWD deaths are purely for shock value. All spoilers after this point. Killing Abraham right next to Glenn was a pretty terrible move. For instance, since Glenn's death alone would given what they needed, my guess is that fans had seen Glenn's death coming because of the comics, and they wanted to temporarily subvert expectations, completely destroying subplots set up with 2 other characters. On the original topic, the death of Cole was the death of his father. Without him, his dad loses motivation to keep surviving the way he has, especially after Laura's death. Everyone he knew and loved from before the apocalypse is now dead. They've taken his reason to live. It opens some character interactions. Sure. But Rick didn't exactly need more motivation to fight, if that was even the intended purpose. Overall, I think it only managed to confuse and dumbfound the audience. The Walking Dead is basically zombie Russian roulette at this point. When it's time for a musical episode, you've jumped the shark. Variety compilation clip show episodes are even worse. It's even worse when a show does one and acts like they are being ironic about it. Community did a good parody of this with a clip show where none of the clips referred to any previous episode. Community did an amazing job at using tropes to their advantage by having a bed exist. I have rewatched that series probably 5 times over just in the last year, and every gimmick episode is amazingly handled. Except the puppet episode, which just so happens to be a musical episode. I know most people hate Grey's Anatomy, but my adopted sister and I bonded over it, so we're huge fans. It took me a while, but it was the episode where Amelia and Hunt's marriage fails, and not because of the tumor but because of Teddy. The back and forth was just so annoying, and they were living together and didn't think it would happen. It was so annoying I took a break from the binge. I was the biggest Grey's Anatomy fan, but stopped watching a few seasons back. I think what finally killed it was Amelia not knowing who the father of her baby was. What buried it completely was Alex's departure. All that wonderful character development for him to leave his wife for flipping Izzy? Question mark? Exclamation mark. I just tell myself Alex died. It's so much easier. I read a hilarious tweet about it, that Alex is buried under Izzy's porch, and she wrote the letters to cover it up. The whole last season of Supernatural had me wanting to oof myself tbh. The last episodes were painful to watch, and not because it was sad. They were so bad that it made me angry. That weird dumbest cyberpunk episode of Stranger Things where Eleven wears eyeliner and a trench coat. They completely butchered an opportunity to reveal more of her past with some completely left field shit. Hey, she went through a techno phase. It happens to the best of us. The last 4 episodes of Game of Thrones, except not nearly, but entirely, I think in years to come this phenomenon will be given a name. Over the course, if a handful of episodes they somehow managed to turn me from a diehard fan to someone who hates even talking or thinking about it. I know that I'm not the only one either. It's crazy. The first episode of the first season of Black Mirror, the pig ducking one. I know so many people who watched that first and then didn't want to watch the rest of the show. Fortunately, the first one I saw was with a friend who was watching a different one. all of the episodes of The Office with Will Ferrell. I love the parts with Michael saying goodbye in the song. But man, is Dean Jello Vickers annoying. Here is my version of the downhill progression of The Office. 1. Erin and Gabe become a couple. 2. Michael leaves. 3. Robert California arrives. 4. Clark tries to trick Erin into posing nude. Not Scott's Todd's cringe, but Rappy cringe. 5. Pete and Erin fall in love just because. 6. Brian. My wife and I both watched the show from start to finish, and when Brian became a thing, we both said, it's time for this show to end. Apostrophe. As soon as Indy became regional manager, the show was fine through the end. But I hated how he becomes manager and we're all rooting for him. Then he comes back from the leadership retreat, and he becomes a villain for no reason. I hated how he fought so hard for Erin and then disappeared. And his character was a ducking asshole. Hey PSSST. Please subscribe and like.